Who's your commander?
Good luck.
Equip.
Move to combat. Resolves.
Right.
Now, before you attack
Does
me,
anyone have an answer?
well played.
Good game.
Hello everyone, my name is DJ, this is the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel, and the Kaldheim Commander decks have been spoiled today, and so we can find out what is in this product. First off, there are two different decks, and right now you can get both of them from tons of different websites for under $40. So these are great deals, and anywhere between $15 and $20 a piece. Means that we have really low expectations for the types of reprints in here. Instead, we're interested in the new cards and the playability of these decks. All right, let's start breaking down the Elven Empire deck. This is on MTG Goldfish, but the lists are up everywhere. The brand new face card of this commander deck is Lathril, Blade of the Elves. 2 black-green for a 2/3 legendary elf noble, has menace, and whenever Lathril, Blade of Elves deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. Then you can tap Lathril, and 10 elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life, and you gain 10 life. I really like this commander. I think it's awesome for elves. Elves have been kind of stuck in mono green for a really long time, and only recently have we gotten some really good commanders in Golgari, and this might be one of the best. I think that this elf creation ability is very strong because you create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. Remember the other legend from these precons just creates 1 spirit per turn. When Lathril deals combat damage, yeah, it might just create 2 elves, or it might create way more. And then the reach, as soon as the battlefield gets bogged down, you can just start tapping your elves, and then you just create this draining effect that your opponents can't get away from. Lathril is very good, and I'm excited to build elves. Next, let's take a look at Pact of the Serpent. 1 black for sorcery. Choose a creature type. Target player draws X cards and loses X life, where X is the number of creatures they control of the chosen type. I like this a lot. It's really fun in tribal decks. Now, it does have a pretty big downside of sometimes not working. Like after a board wipe, or when you've been set back, or when you need to play this on 3 and hit your land drops, it just won't work the way that you want it to. So why not have something that works really well all the time, like a Read the Bones? Well, I think that the upside, the ceiling on this is so high that you might want to run Pact of the Serpent. Because if you're planning on having 10, 11 elves on the battlefield to start activating Lathril, and you've built your deck around it, then you can pay 3 mana and draw 5 or 10, or aim this at your opponent. Just imagine tapping Lathril to do 10 damage and then targeting another player, dealing 11 damage and making them draw 11 cards. That could take someone out of the game. So the reach of Pact of the Serpent is so much fun. Ruthless Winnower is 3 black for a 4/4 elf rogue. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-elf creature. We have these regular edict effects on a lot of different creatures. The fact that this is on an elf and could be one-sided is great. There are a lot of elves that make incidental creatures. We'll talk about things that aren't elves that support elves, like Wirewood Symbiote a little bit later. But some elves create wolves or bears, but do you know what? That seems okay. So even though this might not be the most phenomenal edict that always happens, if it kills a few creatures, it's going to be totally great. Next, we have Serpent Soul Jar. 2 and a black for an artifact. Whenever an elf you control dies, exile it. You can tap it and pay 2 until end of turn. You may cast a creature spell from among cards exiled with Serpent Soul Jar. This is a very clunky form of recursion, and I feel like black has good enough recursion, and so if we want recursion, we should find it in other places. In this deck, I think it'll be fine, and it'll be a sort of value engine and protection for your elves. Next up, we have Bounty of the Skemfar. 2 and a green for a sorcery. Reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You can put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and an elf card from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is pretty solid because it ramps and because it goes 6 cards deep. I think that if you have really strong lands like a Gaia's Cradle, you might not be the right audience that has a Gaia's Cradle, but if you do and you're searching down for that land, that might be good. Maybe you're looking for other land synergies, and so going deeper for a land could be really strong for you. Also going for specific elves, like maybe you need an elf to combo out or to really get your synergy going. Otherwise, I'm wondering why this isn't just solid ramp or solid card draw. It's going to be fine. I mean, if you think about a lot of other ramp effects, it's 2 mana to get a land onto the battlefield. And so you've essentially gotten to select an elf for just 1 mana in your top 6. That seems okay. This is a solid form of ramp and card advantage in a sorcery. The problem is that every so often it'll whiff and that'll feel awful. So hopefully it'll give you tons of options most of the time. Crown of Skemfar is 2 green for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each elf you control and has reach. And then for 2 and a green, you can return Crown of Skemfar from your graveyard to your hand. The fact that this recursion costs 7 mana to get it going again. 2 and a green to get it back to your hand, and then 2 green to get it onto the battlefield. It means that it is a very, very clunky effect. It doesn't even give your elf trample or anything. It gives it reach. So no, I'm not in for Crown of Skemfar. It's fun to make your elves bigger, but if you already have an army of elves, why is it important to just have one to be really powerful? I think that people really want to put this on the commander and deal a ton of damage menacing in. But honestly, Crown of Skemfar will be fun, and then you'll realize it's clunky, and then you're going to cut it from your deck. Next, Wolverine Riders. I like in goblins and elves and zombies the big ones, and this is a 6 mana elf, and I'm a fan of that. Sometimes you want some bigger creatures along the elvish curve. 4 green for a 4/4. At the beginning of each upkeep, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to its toughness. Little bit of incidental life gain, creating a bunch of elf warrior tokens, really floods the board. This is a thumbs up. It's not going to be in the most competitive elf decks that really curve out like crazy, and when they're hitting 5 or 6 mana, they're killing their opponent. But for normal elf decks, this is awesome. Totally love it. Elderfang Venom is 2 black-green for an enchantment. Attacking elves you control have Death Touch, and whenever an elf you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I like this effect a lot. I like draining your opponents out and creating situations where you can attack. So often in Commander, we get bogged down and we get defensive, and forcing the attack is fun, and Elderfang Venom lets us get there. This is not on a creature, it's an enchantment, it's a support card, and so we have to pick and choose our support cards really carefully, because if we dilute our deck and take away too many elves, then all of those elf synergies start getting weaker and weaker. So you have to ask yourself, is Elderfang Venom better than draw effects like the Great Henge, or, other damage effects that I might be sharing a little bit later. And so it's just up to you. I think Elderfang Venom is going to be great, and it's particularly good when you combine it with some of the overrun effects that elves usually run. If you give your elves +3/+3 and trample, and they happen to have Death Touch, then no creatures are getting in the way. They're just going to trample through and deal tons of damage, because if you only have to issue lethal damage, and for Death Touch, that's 1 damage, and then the rest tramples over. It's a really fun effect. So let's take a look at Elven Empire and find out some of the cards that could be drawing you towards this deck. Well, the biggest reprint is Rhys the Exiled, and it doesn't need to be an $18 card. The price tag on this is going to plummet out the bottom, and yeah. So don't think you're getting $18 for this card, but if you have it, it's great to have, man. I think it's fine. I like it a lot. Next, we have some other really expensive cards. We have Canopy Tactician, which is a phenomenal elf card. 4 mana for a 3/3, gives you mana, it pumps your elves. It's just really solid. I mean, it's nowhere near Elvish Archdruid, which gives you even more mana and still pumps your elves, but we can't all be Elvish Archdruid, am I right? Next, we have another new card, Pact of the Serpent, which I mentioned. I liked it. I can see other people like it too. Another new card, Bounty of the Skemfar. Don't believe that's going to end up being $10. Serpent Skull Jar, not worth $10. Crown, not worth $10. And Ruthless Widower, not worth $10. So if you're looking at these price tags up here and you're thinking, oh, this is an amazing deal. No, all of those cards that I just mentioned are going to be not worth anything at all. Same thing, Reese the Exile is, but things like Elvish Archdruid will maintain its value. Things like Merowyn the Nurturer, just an awesome card. Will drop a little bit in price, but it'll stay around $1. Wood Elves is always good. You need it in all of your different decks. It's just really solid. Of course, don't forget about Soul Ring and Arcane Signet in this deck too, just like the other precon. So it's really hard to have Soul Ring and Arcane Signet and not, meet the value of a $20 deck. It's just really, really fun. Honestly, this is a really great version of an elf deck. I love the way that it's built. It has a lot of really solid elf synergies. It has a few anthems in it. It has ways to push damage through. Here's the Endrace Forerunners up there. Not a Crater Hoof, but definitely pushes damage through. We got the Cultivator of Blades. Again, not a very strong card in Commander, but still finds a good way of pushing damage through. They've got really solid forms of card advantage in Ramp, Harvest Season, the Serpent, Poison the Cup is some removal, Ambition's Cost. These big effects like Casualties of War is really fun in Commander too. So I think that it's really well built. And there's also a lot of room for improvement because Elves is a crazy well-known strategy. And there are a lot of elf cards that are just like $5 or $6 a card. This is going to have a little bit of a higher budget for upgrading, but that's okay. Like you can pick up a few elves here, a few elves there, and find easy replacements. Like this Elvish Rejuvenator, it's going to be one of the first ones out. I just don't like it very much. Same thing with this Jaspira Sentinel. I don't know why you wouldn't just have another sort of mana dork like Elvish Mystic, Llanowar Elves or something like that. And so you are going to be able to find a lot of room. Like just some of these are a little bit weaker. For 5 drops, Twin Blade Assassins is a little bit clunky. Same thing with the Voice of the Woods. Yeah, I don't really want to be spending my turns tapping 5 untapped elves to make just a big old 7/7, but it seems fine. I'm totally cool with it, but there's a lot of upgrades and a lot of different ways that you can make this deck a little bit better. So let's take a look at that right now. All right, I'm over here on edhrec.com and I'm in the Elves section. If you go over here on themes, you can look at Elves and it is the second most popular tribe in Magic. And we can see that Lathril and Abomination of Llanowar, these new Golgari elf commanders, are getting a lot of attention, including some of the partner pairings. So people are loving this pair of black and green elves. But we can still see that the most popular commander is Azuri Renegade Leader, and it should be Azuri's Amazing. You should definitely put this deck coming in at $1.80. It's 1 green for a 2/2 Legendary Elf Warrior, 1 green to regenerate another target elf. That's good board protection, even though Azuri himself can't be saved. And then 2 green, elf creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. If you are going wide, these overrun effects can just take over the game. Let's go down to some of the new cards and top cards. One of the new card that I want to mention is Elvish Dreadlord. I love this card. It's 3 black for a 3/3 zombie elf. It has Death Touch. And when Elvish Dreadlord dies, non-elf creatures get -3/-3 until end of turn. So you can set up situations where you get big board wipes from your elves. And of course, the Encore ability is crazy, letting you get in big attacks and doing a bunch of damage to all these non-elves across the battlefield. Next, let's focus on these high synergy cards. These are cards that are in a huge percentage of decks. And one thing to notice is that a lot of them are in this deck. If we look at this first page right here, we can see that Elvish Archdruid, Imperious Perfect, Elvish Mystic, Morrowind, Beast Whisperer, Reclamation Sage, Liliana Huntmaster, and Shaman of the Pack. All of these high synergy cards are already built into this deck. So that is amazing. I think that you could easily include a Llanowar Elves, 21 cents. You could pick and choose your mana dorks however you choose. But one thing that I think is a really solid mana dork that people should be paying attention to is Priest of Titania. $4.40 for this little mana dork. but it's so good. It's tap, add green to your mana pool for each elf on the battlefield. So this can just ramp you into tons and tons of mana. And when you have mana sinks like Azuri, it ends up being just a game-winning synergy. One great place to stick all of your mana is Jiraga Warcaller. Just costs 1 mana to put it on the battlefield, but it has multi-kicker for 1 green. So the more mana you sink in when you cast this, it gets that many +1/+1 counters, and it gives your elves creatures that much +1/+1 Anthem. It's pretty good, coming in at just under $4. I also want to point out cards like Elvish Champion, pumping your team and giving them Forced Walk. Any Anthem is going to be really good. Coming in at $4.19, coming in at $4.63, Deathrite Shaman. If you don't have fetches and you're not playing in a meta with a lot of fetches, this isn't the ramp creature that's so reliable that we love so much. But the activated ability on Deathrite Shaman is pretty good. Black tap, exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, which is graveyard hate. We like having that in our deck, but each opponent loses 2 life. So with just a simple activation in a 4-player game, you're having 6 life being lost and sort of removing those combo pieces from your opponent's graveyard. I'm surprised Llanowar Visionary wasn't in there. 18 cents, draw a card, ramp you into bigger things. Really magical. If you do find that you want some life gain, Well Wisher's really fun, but we need to live on the edge here. We do not need this amount of life gain. We can just attack. Gaining life. What of it? Jiraga Chi Speaker is a good piece of ramp, but there's lots of ramp in Elves you can pick and choose. Realm Walker, if you open this up in Kaldheim, you can put that in here if you want to. Playing off the top of your library with Elves is very good because they're pretty cheap, so you might be able to play 2 or 3 off the top of your library if you happen to be lucky. Wiredwood Symbiote. If you don't have cards like the Priest of Titania, then Wirewood Symbiote loses some of its advantage. It's also an insect and not an elf, so this is one level of synergy that you're losing. But basically it lets you return an elf you control to untap another elf. You also want to think about what elves you're returning to your hand. Elvish Visionary is a common one because it lets you create this engine where you create more mana, you play another elf, you draw more cards, etc. Moving on down the list, we have some explosive stuff out of Heritage Druid, but this is for the more aggressive elf strategies, and at $5, I don't think it's worth it for you. If we look here, we have the replacement for Endways for runners, Craterhoof Behemoth, goes in a lot of decks. It's $40. Don't worry about it. Let's find other ways to win the game. I'm surprised, though, that with a deck going wide, we don't have Dwynen's Elite in there. It's 14 cents and it gives you 2 bodies. And when you're looking to get up to 10 bodies to tap and deal 10 damage or, just get more damage through, I'm surprised Dwynen's Elite wasn't in there. All right, if you have an Allosaurus Shepherd and there's no place for it to go, sure, you can put it in, but it's $85. It's gross. So no, sell it and buy a whole nother commander deck. I happen to have one, so if I had an elf deck right now that I was working on, I would put it in because it gives us this magical activated ability where you activate it and it pumps the power of everything. That's the thing that we're looking at after we go wide, is those Crater Hoofs, those Allosaurus Shepherds, those other things, not to mention counter hate. I love messing with my opponent's blue spells. Regal Force is a fun elemental that helps us draw cards, but we have another effect that helps us draw cards in black, and so I think I'd stick with that. Fauna Shaman is fun if we have sort of a toolbox elf deck. I find it a little bit slow, but overall survival of the fittest, even if it's on an elf, is very powerful. In attacking decks, I also love Storev, Dev Karin Lich. This is an elf, but it's a 5/4 trampler for 4, and it gets your creatures back. So if you're constantly attacking and dealing damage and sacrificing creatures to get damage through, Storev can help you rebuy some of those creatures. And I love the fact that it's a 65-cent card. Quirion Ranger is kind of like the Wirewood Symbiote. If you have combo pieces going on, it could be really good. Nath of the Guiltleaf could be fun, under $2, creates more creatures, has your opponents discard cards. Fantastic. One other thing I want to mention is that elves naturally flood the board full of creatures, and so you need to be resilient to your opponent's board wipes and interaction. That's why I think cards like Heroic Intervention are very critical to this type of deck, because one Wrath of God shouldn't destroy everything. And this is $577, so it's a little bit expensive. Golgari Charm is a good backup, but I just mentioned Wrath of God, where you can't regenerate your creatures, and this clause of regenerate each creature you control falls flat. Still, budget inclusion, Golgari Charm is great. I also wanted to mention Caller of the Claw. It's another way to protect your board, even though it replaces your elves with bears. But a bear army can still win a game. I also think that Return of the Wild Speaker is a great replacement for these anthems I'm talking about, because it's sitting right around $2 instead of Craterhoof's $40 or Allosaurus Shepherd's $85, and it's way better than Cultivator of Blades, which I think is quite clunky. There's one more reach effect that I was thinking about. By the way, Trump the Hordes coming in at 1130 is a good way to win a game, but not a good way to keep your friends. I wanted to point out in the artifact section, Throne of the God Pharaoh. There we go. So, Throne of the God Pharaoh is 2 mana for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. Notice your commander in this has you tapping 10 creatures plus itself in order to have everyone lose 10 life. And so in combination with Throne of the God Pharaoh, you can just do a ton of damage, just double that up. Just do 21 damage in a single turn, just because it's... And also, if you just happen to be attacking, which this deck wants to do, it's pretty good. It's coming in at just under $4. And of course, there's a lot of other cards that could go with this. I also like Skull Clamp for changing in your creatures for something better. But again, $4. There's a lot of different card draw effects out there. I mentioned the Great Henge earlier, $35. It's way more than I would want to spend on this. Herald's Horn is kind of a fun card advantage engine, but coming in at $10, man, all of these. In the other deck, I had a lot of quarter cards to suggest to you. In this one, it feels like every card that fits costs like $5 or $10. Guardian Project is another card advantage engine, $7.80. Growing Rights of Itlamok, you want the budget Gaia's Cradle, and it costs $18. Even Beastmaster's Ascension, which I felt should have been a budget card because of how much it's been reprinted, sitting just below $4. And so if you take all of the advice, all of the cards that I've mentioned, you're kind of building an elf deck from scratch, and it's going to cost you well over $100, and in many cases several $100s. So I think that means that it's kind of up to you to pick and choose what cards you like the best, what areas you think you need to improve upon with your playgroup, whether it's to develop this early game, get a little bit more ramp in, maybe it's develop your late game, get rid of Andrae's Forerunners and this Cultivator of Blades that I don't like, and get some good ways to sort of finish the game. Heck, maybe it's to remove some of the awkward ramp that's in this deck, where it's Elvish Rejuvenator or Harvest Season, and start putting in things that are a little bit more reliable so you can get up to those big plays. Whatever you do, I think that this is a great starting point. I honestly think that this commander is solid and this deck is really good, even though there are a lot of kind of no-brainer $5 to $10 upgrades. That's something that you can slowly add over time. So I would highly recommend this deck. I think it's going to be fun out of the box and amazing to upgrade. I also want to thank Dragon Shield for sponsoring this video. They have some new amazing sleeves coming out that are inspired by Kaldheim. We've got this amazing dragon. I'll show you on the screen a little bit, and Loki right here. These sleeves are just some of my favorites, just because of the wonderful matte finish, a little bit of shine on it, but really it's because they're built so well and they protect your magic cards with strength and great shuffle feel too. They got them for pre-sale over here on Cool Stuff Inc., another sponsor of the Jumbo Commander YouTube channel. Thank you, Cool Stuff Inc. If you want to save 5% off your order, you can go ahead and use Jumbo5 at checkout. Look at these are so cool. Sorry, use 5% at checkout to save 5% off your order. I also want to thank my patrons. They support me every single day. There would be no Jumbo Commander without them. Thank you, patrons. And thank you for watching this video. If there is a commander from any of Kaldheim that you're interested in, let me know down in the comments so that we can make more decks. All right, everyone. Bye-bye.